Welcome to the Independence by Design podcast, where we discuss what it means to be a business owner and ways to get unstuck from the day-to-day so we can design a business that gives us a life of independence. I was very excited to have Bill Cowan on the show because he was in a Vistage workshop that I gave 4 years ago, and since then has launched his own group, and I was able to present to his group of entrepreneurs. And I found out that Bill was the previous owner of BioLawn, which is a lawn care company that I personally use and really enjoy their services. And so when I heard that Bill had bought that company, grown it, and sold it, I couldn't wait to get him on the show. And he's going to be walking you through his whole journey, going from veterinary school and medicine to medical device to higher education to actually buying BioLawn, growing it, selling it, to becoming a Vistage Chair. I absolutely love hearing the context and the background behind why people make decisions. Bill walks us through what he actually capitulated on when he ended up buying the company and how he thought about that as he was growing a lawn care company when he didn't really care about lawn care and he actually wanted business to business, and it ended up being business to consumer. Just fun just hearing how people make decisions and how he ended up where he is today and what he thinks about the journey of buying, growing, and selling a company. I know you're going to enjoy this conversation because it was super fun to hear the full story arc. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Bill. Well, Bill, I'm excited to have you on the show. It's been a couple years since we saw each other. And I appreciate you. I think, did I see the post on LinkedIn and then you reached out, or did I read?
No, I actually, the way in my conversation on Chris Jones's podcast.
Oh, that's what it was.
Your name came up. And I thought, hey, I should let Ryan know that his name came up on that podcast. And so I shot that to you, and you said, hey, we've talked about being on my podcast. Let's do that.
Let's do it.
Like,
Yeah,
let's do it.
Well, I'm excited, and I think we can set the stage for the listeners, and then we can follow the story arc. The reason I'm excited to have you on the show is you and I met 4 years ago when you were about to launch your Vistage group, I think. And
I was just on the verge of launching it. Yep. So I was in a Vistage group about to launch a Vistage group.
Okay. And when you told me because it was BioLawn, I think is what it was, right?
Yeah.
Right?
So I have an unusual history, I guess.
Why don't you give us the story arc and then we can unpack it?
Sure. So, all right. Well, I'm gonna tell you. I grew up in Hopkins, Minnesota, and went to University of Wisconsin for biochemistry. But I was really a pre-vet. Wanted to be a veterinarian. Incredibly passionate about that. And so I got in the University of Minnesota after I finished up my biochem degree, and graduated from the U. And thought, all right, I'm going to be in private practice the rest of my career, and I'm really excited. And about 3 years in, I was in small animal medicine, and I got a call from a classmate who was the program director of the vet tech program at Medical Institute of Minnesota. He said, "Hey, do you want to teach?" It's like, maybe. So wound up taking that and was an instructor there. But then he got promoted, and so I got promoted to run the program. It was the largest vet tech program in the country. And then I got somebody on my board for the program was working at Guidant medical device. So I wound up going to Guidant out of that, and ultimately became director of clinical studies, running pacemaker, defibrillator, and congestive heart failure studies all over the world out of my department. It was an amazing experience. First of all, just being in a business.
Medical device, this might be a stupid question, Bill, but was it medical device for animals or for humans?
For humans.
Okay. Well, so what was that like making that transition there?
Yeah, so it was remarkable. It now is Boston Scientific. Guidant got purchased after a bidding war between Johnson & Johnson and Boston. And so, people would literally come up to you and say, "Thank you for saving my son's life." And with tears in their eyes, and you'd start crying because you met people who were alive because of the devices we were making. So I love that time with Guidant, and an incredibly well-run company, an amazing leadership team, incredible culture. Everything that came good in my life, in a way, professionally, came out of that experience. But then I got kind of
That's
tapped
saying a
on.
lot.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then
So
so
what
then
would you? Oh,
go
God.
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, I mean, like how confident you are with how you said that. I mean, is there a certain like list of things, like what? Now that you have such a huge exposure to like lots of different types of companies and stuff like,
Yep.
what are some of the things that you look back and go like, God, I'm so glad that like that's unique and that's what I took away from that.
Well, let me tell you a quick story. I had nothing but good bosses in most of my career. I know a lot of people that look at me when I say that and are like, really? I've never had one good boss. I've had pretty much all good bosses. Now, there is two exceptions, but we won't talk about them. But one of them, his name was Jeff Sims, was really an amazing guy. And at one time he said to me, Guidant doesn't offer you permanent employment. It offers you permanent employability because of what you'll learn here.
Cool.
And it was true. I learned so much from that experience that I could kind of go off and do anything with that background. And I would advise anybody who's early in their career is build that portfolio of experiences that will let you do anything you want to do. And uh, so ultimately, I got tapped on the shoulder again, which has happened so many times in my career. I feel really lucky for it. Argosy University was looking for a president. So I left and became kind of went back to education, was president of Argosy. That's where I met my first bad boss in my career. I did not agree with the chair of the board, thought the direction he wanted to go was not right. I was ultimately proven right there later. And so I left and I went to Brown College. I was president there. But I was, for about 6 years, I was thinking, I want to own my own business. Because I haven't experienced that. I've been in these more larger organization environments and just want to know what it'd be like to run my own small business. So I was looking, and that was a tough search because when you decide you're going to move on and you're still in a leadership role, that foot in two worlds is not fun. You're not. Yeah. So I
How
ultimately
long were you doing that?
6 years.
Whoa, you lived with that foot in each world for 6 years?
It was terrible. It was terrible.
Yeah, that's
And
gotta mentally. I lasted 6 months, or it
yeah,
was not like six. No, I'm sorry, a couple months because it's that all in mentality is. Yeah,
yeah. You have to be, when you're a leader, you have to be all in. And when you're looking to buy a business, that's a distraction. That's not good.
what activities and efforts did you go through, Bill, in order to like look and like how did you
Yeah.
start wrapping your head around what did it mean to buy a business or run a business?
Yeah, one of the pieces of that, part of the process, I hired several different brokers on that
Okay.
path. So I really learned about business brokers. And I uh, I had some that I were good learning experiences, um, from the perspective of don't work with them again.
I know what I don't want,
I know
right?
what I don't want. And actually that's what kind of led me to be on Chris's podcast, because I did find that Sunbelt did a great job. That was ultimately who I landed with after two or three kind of bad experiences. And so in any case, in terms of, I created a list of what I was looking for and why I wanted to do it and what was important to me. And that was a good thing to do, but it's also why it took 6 years, because I probably evaluated 25 businesses over 6 years. And I always
Oh,
found something that didn't fit with my list.
how many did you look through to even get to those 25?
Oh, oh man, a lot. I mean, it was,
1,000
yeah, well,
plus?
no, not that many, not that many. I didn't have that kind of time, but I don't know. I mean, a lot. I don't remember the number. It was a long time ago, but it was a pain. It was ultimately what happened, Ryan, was I realized that I couldn't live like this any longer. So I actually resigned a great job, college president, cushy. One of the brokers said to me, "Why do you want to buy a business? I mean, it's like this makes no sense. Why you want to do this?" I just wanted to have that experience. I'm on the PI index. I'm a venture. I wanted to have a new adventure, and buying a small business was going to be a new adventure.
So before we move on, I got some clarifying questions on this because was there someone in your family or some person or experience along the way that provided you with the like, hey, this is the experience that I want to chase? Like, how did you understand what that experience or what like even have that inception of that vision?
No. My dad drove taxi for blue and white cabs. My mom was a baker's assistant at Pop and Fresh Pies. There was no entrepreneurial thing in my family. But I shoveled everybody's driveways as a kid and mowed
Mm-hmm.
their lawns in the summer, you know, and I mean, we were the poorest family on our block. So I always had that financial crunch in my back of my mind. I think that probably drove it a little bit.
So
Always
was
been.
it back to the broker's question of why you're leaving Brown? So that what I'm trying to understand, Bill, is like, was there a a personal growth moment that you wanted to challenge yourself with that you weren't getting at Brown? Was there income or wealth in pursuit that you were looking at? Like what felt
Yeah,
misaligned being
it's never been wealth for me. I've always assumed I would get compensated well if I did good work, and I always have. So I've never been driven by that. It's wanting a new adventure. I get 3 years in to anything, I get bored. I just get bored, and if I'm bored, I'm there's probably nothing that makes me more miserable than being bored. It's a
I'm laughing
problem.
because man, do I relate to that.
Yeah.
I actually,
Yeah.
I've been, yeah, I very much relate to that.
I mean, throughout, my wife, 3 years in, she'd look at me, go, "Oh, here we go again." And so, so it was wanting, and the other piece was for sure was that experience of the chair that I didn't agree with,
Mm.
but was unable to.
Remove him from your situation.
Yeah, I mean, I knew that it wouldn't work out. I knew he'd be gone, but I wasn't going to go through the 2 to 3 years it was going to take for him to be gone.
Yeah, got it.
I didn't want to tolerate that. And so, but so having my own business where I could do what I thought was right without that, you know, higher level. And I always, even though I'd been president and, at high levels, I always had somebody above me, and I wanted to know what it'd be like to be the final decision maker. Of course, I learned that's really hard too. It's not
Yeah.
nirvana, right?
Yeah. There's always someone, whether it's the customers or someone in the situation's got a say in it.
Yeah, well, and
Or
even
you're alone.
you're kind of two persons. You have this obligation to the business, and you have an obligation to your family and to your future, and you're at war with yourself sometimes a little bit, and that was something I'd never experienced before, which I'm glad I did, because I see that, in the peer group, I see that challenge going on for owners all the time. They want
Mm-hmm.
to take care of themselves, and they also want to take care of their employees and their business, and sometimes those two things feel in some sort of conflict, and
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable. And when I was had a board and was the president, I my it felt like my fiduciary responsibility was super clear. I had a responsibility, to ownership or whatever. And when I was the ownership, it felt like less clear, even though it
It,
shouldn't have.
well, it's small digression for a second, because I think it's super relevant to what, as I was giving you the update on my coaching program, like the ownership goals of what someone wants out of the cash flow and the valuation and what timeline, it can be paralyzing, I think, Bill, to have it be up to us. But if we don't identify that point B, you're just ignoring the constraints, right? So like private equity or venture capital or public companies, like the ownership goals and the mandate over reinvestment versus distribution and an evaluation and what timeline is very clear. And then it becomes very fuzzy where it's like, oh, I'm both hats. I'm the operator and the owner. But if we don't identify those ownership goals, then it becomes so loose. And then like every decision almost becomes like this anxiety attack because you don't know how to contextualize it against the trade-offs because the trade-offs aren't clear without that goal. Anyways, I think it's interesting because it isn't very clear very often because no one's forcing us to come up with the clear goals.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. And I do think that's why the program you're doing makes so much sense because you do sometimes need to be forced to go through that exercise and understand it with greater clarity because then you don't have as much of the tug of war.
It'll still be there, but at least the trade-offs can be clear, right?
Yeah, there's clarity around it versus often there is.
What if this? What if that?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're going 6 years. You pull the plug to go all in. So have you found your hit target by the time you resign?
So I decided I needed to I wasn't going to do it if I didn't burn the bridge behind.
What'd your wife say? And how old are you? What's the timeline? What's your family situation on this?
My kids are about 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
10, right around there. And so I don't know, how old am I? I'm in my early 50s or something like that, I guess. And so, prime earning years and everything's going great. I mean, I'm not really working tremendously crazy hours. I'm getting compensated very, very well. Life is great.
Is your wife working? So like, what is she?
My wife is working, but she was a founder of a nonprofit.
Okay.
And there wasn't a lot of profit in the nonprofit. So she wasn't. so it was.
You were the breadwinner.
Yeah, I was a breadwinner. And my wife is amazing. She completely supported me in that, even though she shouldn't have. She should have said, you're not quitting without a better plan than this. I put in notice and I said, I'll stay as long as you want me to stay. Ultimately, they had me stay 6 months. But once I did it, it absolutely lit a fire under me. I went all in because I had the anxiety of, well, I don't have anything set up. And that anxiety drove me. Now
right.
But here's the deal is what I did is I made a couple of compromises, really one primary compromise on my list is one of the things on my list was a B2B business. And I compromised with a B2C. And I remember a couple of months in, or even a month in maybe, I went, wait a second, why am I in B2C? It was on my list. It's right here. Because that anxiety that it created does cloud your thinking. Like I started ignoring things because I wanted to conclude a deal. Ultimately, it worked out really well. It was successful and did a successful exit and all that. So it was all well. It was the right thing for my family. Gave me a lot of flexibility. So it was great. But if I were to advise somebody, you don't need to make that compromise, on your priorities of what you want to do. And I did that. And I wish I hadn't, because I would be interested to have the experience I imagined, which is B2B is a different kind of animal.
I think there's a really good gold nugget in there, Bill, of like anxiety, even though it can be healthy to drive us to get stuff done, can cloud our judgment. But like, that's where it's interesting. Balancing like the clarity of the goals to drive the accountability instead of the fear. We have this saying of my dad who, I think a lot of entrepreneurs like this. And I think if you're interesting of your Vistage group of the people, like so many of us like to see the world from the bottom of the pool. And like the moment my dad would get some air, he wouldn't know what to do. And so he would make a decision to push himself down. And I watch people after they sell, like they do the same situation because they're used to that cortisol rush. And we'll get to that after you've talked about your journey to the exit, but I don't know. It's a balance between the anxiety and the clarity.
It is. And actually, it's interesting you say it because, I read a good book, The Pause Principle,
Hmm.
about the power of the need to pause periodically because your brain thinks differently in a pause than it does in execution and what have you. And
I
that's
like it.
what happens in a peer group is you're pulled out of your normal conversations, you're pulled out of your normal day-to-day tactical drive to create lists and get things done. And your brain, a different part of your brain engages
Hmm.
and in a safe environment with people you trust and who can kind of keep you grounded. And you come up with things you might not have if you
Hmm.
do that on a regular
I
basis.
love it. So when you were going back to and by the way, I appreciate you letting me talk or ask me the many questions about the purchase of the business because I think it's really fun, Bill, hearing the context that people and the trade-offs that they went through when they jumped into it. And then as you grew it, and then as you sold it, and then you're on the other side. It's just interesting to have the kind of the story arc because it provides meaning to like when you made a future hard decision. Like, did you understand business valuations? Were you getting like an SBA loan? Were you using personal funds to buy the business? Like, because what level of risk was in an understanding of valuations did you have as you were going in to looking at the companies?
Yeah, I didn't understand it as well then as I do now. I did ultimately decided to use personal funds because it gave me some flexibility that um, was helpful. Um, and there's another piece to the decision for me. Um, I had uh, grown up, like I mentioned, not the richest family on the block, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it taught me some great lessons to, I mean, I remember, times being tight at times as a kid, and my mom, trying to, scrounge enough money to get food on the table. And I thought that was helpful for me. And I
Mm-hmm.
actually wanted my kids to have that experience. Like I was looking at them going, these kids are spoiled, I can't help myself,
Let's
They,
make
they
this
know they
difficult for all of us. The bottom of the
yeah,
pool, like I was saying.
yeah, they lack for nothing. And so I literally said to them, "Hey, I bought a business. I'm not going to be getting paid for the first couple of years, and things are going to be tight. And even when we could pay for it, I just kept using that as a way for them to, they had a couple of Christmases with not many gifts, and they still talk about it, and they are incredibly financially responsible to this
That's
day.
awesome.
Which so it was good to have that tight period right after you buy a business. It was good for my family.
So how did you land on, so you said business to consumer, what was the business? How did you land on it and why?
Yeah, so I wanted I had on my list something in education was one option, something in healthcare because I have both backgrounds, or something that had an environmental upside. So I looked at solar energy as one of the companies, and something that had an environmentally positive impact. So ultimately, after a lot of different companies I looked at, I came across Biolon, which had this organic focus, organic lawn care. And it wasn't, I had really a lot of passion about lawns, which is another piece of this puzzle that I kind of compromised on a little bit, but I liked the organic piece. And so that's really what led me to that. And it had great financials. I mean, it was a well-run company, was growing, just a nice curve. And it was the first company that other company I looked into, I found, oh, this is really why they're selling.
Oh, that's such a good
Yeah.
comment. Like how many times, like how much time did you invest until you figured out what those things are? And what's a handful of examples of why people were
There was a
selling it that
healthcare
changed
company.
everything?
Yeah, there was a healthcare company I looked at that I probably was, I never got to true due diligence with any of the ones that I
Okay.
looked at. So thank God. But I don't know. I was couple of weeks in on that one. And then in my research, I went, oh, there's a Medicaid, Medicare reimbursement change that's coming next year. That's
Mm-hmm.
why, that's why they're selling,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because if it hadn't been for that, this was an attractive company to buy,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the change in reimbursement was going to be very harmful to this company. And so it was things like that you would discover, oh, okay, I'm not interested in this one.
What was the reason for the Biolon sale? And was it a franchise or
No, although it would make a great franchise.
it's not a franchise? No shit.
No, it is not. No.
So
But,
what was the size of the operations and like why were they selling at that point?
oh, it was about 600K in total revenue, so it's not that big. And which and the the owner wanted to go into ministry, and and that was the reason. And so it so he wanted to exit. He was a really young guy,
How long
and
had the business been around?
it had been around maybe 8 years or something like that. But he had 3 years had taken it from like 100 to like 600. Like
Wow.
yeah, and then I tripled it, and um, so that was kind of
So and how long did you own it?
a I 9 years,
Okay.
9, yeah, and and which is not my plan is doing it for 3 to 5 years, and there was a product defect that I had to clean up before I could exit. It wasn't our product; it was a product we bought from somebody else, and it was marketed as incredibly safe product,
Oh
and it
no.
was from a human health perspective, but it wasn't from a plant care perspective. And so
I'm gonna want to get into some of the growth stuff. But I just want to. So when you in 9 years on, you can share whatever numbers you feel comfortable, whether it's revenue, employee count,
yeah.
or but when you say so, like what was the growth and like how was the operations, the size of the operations when you sold?
So, well, like I said, I tripled it, and actually more than that, but which is a complicated story, I guess. But I actually, the last several years, I actually restrained the growth. I would cut off marketing when I could, because one of the reasons I shouldn't be in a B2C business is I had a very difficult time with any complaints.
Oh,
When
interesting.
you have thousands of clients,
Yeah.
you cannot run a business without complaints. And I would lose sleep over complaints.
Apparently, don't read the comments is what I've been told
Yeah.
by.
And so I just was, and so I would always try to never take the risk of exceeding our capacity to fulfill our commitments. And so, and that was one piece. The other piece
Yeah.
was at a certain point in that industry, your number of buyers declines a lot. There's just
Mm.
not many buyers. And I wanted to keep it at a size that was sellable to a bigger group of people.
You guys, I mean, like you guys grew. I mean, like your brand and like, I mean, like I think when you told me when I found out at your workshop that it was bio, I'm like, oh my God, I've been using you for years.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
it,
like,
it grew. I mean, all that growth came in the first 3 years, pretty
wow.
much. Yeah, it was the growth was, and then I kind of held it back because I didn't. My goal wasn't to build an empire. My goal. This goes back to a story we didn't get to. I had decided I wanted to run peer groups before I bought Biolon.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, I decided that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I was going to do it. And I actually met with Floyd Edelman. I don't know if you know Floyd, but
Name rings a bell.
yeah, he's a great guy. He owned I think I can't remember if it's 10,000 Auto, a Champion auto parts store back in the 70s and 80s. And he owned one of the two. I can't remember which one it was. But anyways, very successful businessman. He also started a peer groups called Inner Circle. And so I had lunch with him and I asked him about, starting a peer group. And he said, Billy, you have an interesting background, good executive experience, but you've never had to worry about making payroll. You haven't experienced what a small business owner is experienced. You really need to do that before you're going to be any good as a running a peer group. So I stopped the idea of that's my business. I'm going to run a peer group and bought a business and joined a peer group. And so my goal wasn't to grow Biolon into this big thing. I wanted to do it for 3 years while I was in a peer group and then sell it and start a peer group. That was the end game. Well, then
3 times longer than you thought.
Well, then this product defect thing, caused me to have to. It didn't make sense to sell it because I had to kind of see that through, which we did. We got everybody through that, and then so then I sold it and was able to go ahead and start the peer group thing, which is what I really wanted to do.
When you look back, if you were to jump on the call with Bill, who's buying Biolon, what are like the 3 pieces of advice you would give him?
Oh, well, the biggest one would be, what about the B2B, Bill?
Well, you've already bought Biolon.
I've already bought it.
Yeah, like don't rub it in your old past self's face.
Yeah, that's a great question. I in retrospect, I probably should have not put the governor on the growth of that business. I probably should have leaned more into growing that. The problem was I don't have a passion for lawn care. It doesn't, it's not, it's the first business I ever was in where I didn't love everything we were doing. When I was in medical device, I loved everything we were doing. When I was a practicing veterinarian, I loved everything we were doing. When I taught, oh my goodness, did I love teaching. Loved everything about teaching. I liked running the business of Biolon, but I didn't really have a big passion for the actual performance of fulfilling contracts.
How did that dynamic ripple into your mental health, your family, like the business culture, like your leadership? I mean, how did that impact you?
I think it definitely wore on me. I met with a business guy that I had a lot of respect for, Ron Extam, a great networker. A lot of people on this podcast are going to know who Ron is because he's at every networking event that ever existed. And I don't know, maybe a year in, I met with him and I was pretty haggard. And he said, "How much are you exercising?" I said, "Well, not at all." He said, "You need to start exercising," because I did feel stressed by being in a business that I didn't have that passion for. It used to be, I'd wake up in the morning, I couldn't hardly wait to get into teach or to, get into, work on the medical device stuff, because everything about it was interesting and fun. And so I learned that I had to exercise pretty much every day, and that was, kind of turned that around and kind of got me back into a good energy state. So
what was it like, Bill, buying the business? So taking your financial accumulation that you had until that point, putting a lot on the line, and it sounds like it wasn't B2B, so there was a big, huge miss there, and you weren't passionate about it. Did you process it? How did you process? Did you have regrets? Did you think about you could have stayed at, the Brown, teaching it? Like, how did that?
I staying at Brown was not for,
so you didn't ruminate on that?
I didn't want to, I didn't have regrets about that.
Okay.
I definitely had regrets that I didn't stick to my list. I didn't need to I did find before my last day at Brown, because I think I was there for 6 months before I finally was done. I did close about a week after that. So I could have gone a couple more, 3 more months and, just taken a little bit more time and found something that also absorbed my passion. Because the one thing that I read this while I was looking, find a business that you enjoy running because you're going to be doing it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be doing it 70 hours a week, at least at first. And that really it really got drove home to me in the process of running that business is, I don't love what we're doing as, performance is not in my core. I don't love that. And I wish I was doing something I love what we're doing. Like you don't have to pay me to do this. Because that's
Mm-hmm.
every other job I had, I almost felt that way. You don't really have to pay me to do this. This is so much fun. Being a veterinarian, working with animals, I loved it. It was just a
Mm-hmm.
great thing. And I also got paid as like this extra thing, And
Mm-hmm.
so anybody who's going to like leave corporate America to own their own business, make sure it's something you love doing because you're going to do a lot of it. And, you want to love all aspects of it.
What was the dynamic of the B2B that you were so focused on? Like why were you so focused on B2B? What were you trying to get out of that? And why did you capitulate on the B2C?
Well, I think one thing is, when you're in B2B, you're just in a lot more, I guess, professional relationships, and you're cultivating long-term professional relationships. In a B2C, there's a lot more transactional, I think of it as trolling. You're trolling for problems. You have a lot of lines in the water, and you're going to catch some problems. No matter what you do, you're going to catch clients that you wished you hadn't caught because they want to make your life miserable. And
Do you think
and
there's any business that doesn't apply to, though?
I think I think you're right. There, to a degree, that's probably true. But I just think in a B2B, you don't have so many lines in the water. There's a better probability of having you're developing deeper long-term relationships, because your business, your businesses are more intertwined. It's less transactional. I think at least there's more potential for that
I
in
can
a
see that.
B2B.
I can see that. Um, what were some of the things that worked well when you grew so fast? And how did that show up and what were you doing?
Yeah, so it was a lot of it was reputational. I think we had a great reputation, and we really um, did. I think I enhanced that because I had this. In veterinary medicine, you can't have any failures. You're a family doctor for the pet,
Mm-hmm.
so you have that ownership ethic of making sure every outcome's as good as it can possibly be. I brought that into the business, and I really worked my tail off to try to create a business that had very few complaints in an industry that complaints are actually fairly high. It's really, you don't control the weather, you don't control the substrate, there's, within limits. And so um so I think that was a big part of it. We did a lot of old school marketing that nobody else was doing. Everybody, kind of moved away from you know,
Like
paid,
paid mailers and stuff like
yeah,
that? Or?
mailers and stuff, and they really worked. Um, and you could kind of you could say, I want to grow this much. And if you spent this much on marketing, you would grow that much. It was
Hmm.
very,
You could see the through line, which
it
is
was
not very.
it was a formula. Yeah. And if it was an industry where if you worked really hard, you'd almost always be successful. And I think a lot of industries, that's not always true. You can work really
Mhm.
hard in medical device. You can do a medical device startup and work incredibly hard, and it's not in the cards. That
Mhm.
was an
Mhm.
industry that, as long as you worked really hard and you were reasonably intelligent about it, you would pretty much were guaranteed a success. It was a very cash flow positive. You're always in positive cash flow. which was really nice.
which is really nice. There's a lot of people listening are going, yeah, wouldn't that be nice?
You were always were in positive cash flow, and that
The
was
customer deposit, that is the
yeah,
benefit
yeah,
of
yeah,
B2C.
prepaid services. And
Hmm.
so that was fantastic. And, it also, I had still had young kids who had things that I needed to deal with, and it gave me a lot of flexibility to be able to take care of them. So it was a great choice. Ultimately, it all worked out. I did well on the exit. The new owners are doing really well and love running that company. And they're both master degree horticulturalists from the University of Minnesota. This is what they love doing. They love this industry.
They're not vets.
Here,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm a veterinarian. I'm just, this isn't, I did, I switched industries 5 times in my career. One of those was not the right industry for me.
What did
So,
you learn about yourself by not being in, what did you learn about yourself with that experience?
well, I don't know if I mean, I imagine I learned a lot of new things. I don't know that they feel that new. I mean, what I've learned over and over again is I can walk into almost any industry and figure it out. I did figure it out. I figured out how to do something I'd never done before. And that it's a great confidence builder when no matter what I land on, I'll probably figure it out and I'll be fine and I'll make it work.
What's your process for dissecting what to do and what to work on? Like, and maybe my follow-up question to that, Bill, is because you bought the business, here's where I think is a unique dynamic that it's a divergence that I've seen of people that I've interviewed is like when they have this understanding of how valuations work, because it starts changing your behavior. So you
Mm-hmm.
bought a business, so you kind of understand. I don't know if you understood what created value, and they're going through due diligence, and you're finding the why someone's trying to sell. How did that understanding of valuations and you knowing that you wanted to get out from day one, how did that impact what you were doing in the
Yeah.
business and how you were making decisions?
Yeah, there's several questions embedded, or I think there's several questions
Mm-hmm.
embedded in that question. One was it was incredibly helpful to know on day one, my goal is to sell this business in 3 to 5 years, because everything I did was around how do I make this the most saleable business possible?
Mm-hmm.
How do I make it such that I get the best multiple I can get?
Mm-hmm.
So right away, I'm like, how do I build a team that I can leave behind? How do I divorce me as a person from the business? I would guess that the majority of our clients didn't know I was the owner. I, you know, something I had to stamp out amongst the office staff is, well, let me talk to the owner. No, 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 no. I don't want them to care about the owner. I want them to care about the business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I was constantly creating documented processes and procedures so that the next owners could take it over and have that all in hand. And that would be part of essentially the IP for the business is how do we do things. So I always had an eye to that as I built it, and that was very helpful. Kept me very focused on that end game.
In because I think the trap that people get into when you said that you're kind of suppressing some growth, I mean, it sounds like there's practical reasons for, and I'm curious, I want to hear a little bit more about the spectrum of buyers and stuff like that. But what I see, Bill, a lot of people get stuck in is this solving for annual income, like reducing costs because they want more K1 income
Yeah,
versus the normalized EBITDA and the multiple growth, which is just you're reinvesting. So
yeah,
any thoughts on like that mindset and how you did you?
yeah. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, and it at times might be a flaw, but I have had a lifelong philosophy of um, believing that if I work hard, I'll get well compensated. So I've kind of never worried about in anything I've done I've never really worried about how much I'm going to make. I've never negotiated a salary. I've, I've always just expected that I'm going to be treated right, whether it's by people who employed me initially, and then in my business. If I work really hard, I will make the money I need. And so I wasn't kind of focused on that. I know some people are like, how do I make sure I'm going to make this much this year? I didn't kind of, I didn't start that way. It was like, I'm going to work really hard to make this as successful a business as possible. And I assume that if I do that, there'll be enough money left over for me. And
Mhm.
there was. I mean, it it uh, it played out that way. So I was less intentional than I think in your that's embedded in your question.
I think that's a fair point. Have you, with your Vistage in your exposure to other business owners, have you seen any examples where if someone assumes that and it doesn't play out well?
It assumes the way I operate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't. I think that almost laissez-faire way of approaching it is not common. So I'm not sure I've actually run into that
Oh,
before.
really? Really?
I don't know. I think most of the owners that I work with. Um, I mean, I think that's probably in there somewhere, but I don't think. I think I've been pretty. It's part of what let me walk away from a very high income job and go buy a business that
Mhm.
wasn't going to be produce anywhere near the income that I had, because I just had this faith that it would if I just put in the right amount of effort.
Mhm.
So I don't know that I've run into anybody who's shared that particular kind of approach to it. I think.
It's interesting. I have seen I have personal exposure to a spectrum from like your
Mhm.
laissez-faire to like I think there's potentially too rigid and too over engineering of it.
Yeah.
And I've seen things, unfold various degrees. And that's why I was asking, because I've seen people where like they do have the right intention. And like I see employees take advantage of them or their customers take advantage of them where they're not getting the margins they should. I mean, it's not always necessarily on the valuation side. It's just,
Oh, I see that. Yeah. Now I agree with you. Yeah, I see that. Pricing. I mean, that I've seen owners feel guilty about the prices they're charging when they should be
right.
charging, when they're undercharging.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So from that
Um,
perspective, yeah, I see that happen fairly often.
um, so you had said that you had decided to put a governor on it because you thought, or it did have an impact on the types of buyers, spectrum of buyers. Like, who did you think were the potential buyers, and why, and how did that size impact that?
Yeah, so I saw, you know, there's a point in that industry that you're really going to have to sell to a large corporate national chain if you get to a certain size. And because Bylon had this organic focus, that there's that wouldn't probably that buyer would buy it, but then they would just get rid of that immediately.
Get rid of it as the competition because it pissed them off because they were doing other things.
No,
And
they would just get rid of anything that was organic or had a
that's what I
safer
mean. Like they would
spectrum.
have like,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And so it would cease to be, and it would probably really aggravate the client base, you know.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, if
I
I
mean,
was
they'd be
like using
mad.
Bylon and then all of a sudden they got
Yeah,
all
they'd
the
be
chemicals
mad.
going on in my, yeah, I would.
They'd be mad. And
Yeah.
so I just was like, I think I want to have more of somebody like me, who would be a local person who would buy it, or be merged into another company, or somebody would want to take it out, make a franchise out of it. So.
What was your level of exposure of like ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, or like, because I like doing some sort of internal buyout or like,
Yeah, I didn't really become aware of ESOPs until actually I became a Vistage Chair,
okay,
and
yeah,
and I was
not
like,
shocking.
yeah, and I'll tell you, it's funny because amazing way to exit a business, so much flexibility.
Yeah, it's buying a cash flowing company. As long as the company's cash flow can service the debt, I mean, which is the same thing. Did the two horticulturalists did they buy it with an SBA loan, or how did you market it with like Sunbelt again? Like, how did you go about selling the business?
Uh, yes, Sunbelt had some involvement. They ultimately that wasn't how it finally worked out, just because it's complicated. But I did work with Sunbelt to a degree
Was it
on the
complicated?
sale.
I have no idea. You've never told me this, but what I'm hearing is you listed it with them, you found the buyer, and then they still had an exclusive or something.
There
Or...
was a few. There was a few buyers that I had excluded because they had expressed interest in the past.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it.
And so in any case,
How was the sale? Like, so did how was your understanding of transactions and that 9 years and thinking about the end in mind? How did it prepare you for that day? Like, how did you understand? Like, did they have bank financing? Like, how did it, like, walk us through, like, what was the process of actually
yeah,
selling
they
it? How
had
did you
yeah
feel?
they had bank financing, and it was um I did some seller financing as well, so it was a combination, and here's the thing, that the structure of our deal was unique.
Mm,
Of I took on a lot of risk. There was a lot of performance in it,
okay.
and it was because I believed in these guys. I knew they would. First of all, I trusted them. Like, I
How
knew
did
they
you build
were.
that trust?
I'd known them for quite a long time, and
Really?
yeah, I'd known them for quite a long time. That's why I excluded them from, as because I
Were they
always saw them as.
advisors in the business, or like what were they?
One of them actually had been, I had bought from, he was, I bought product
Okay.
from this company. Um, and the other one, I also bought equipment from the other one. And I knew they wanted to start a business, and we'd had conversations, and we couldn't make it work, and we couldn't make it work. And then it kind of went quiet. And so, but ultimately we put a structure together that was very unique, that met their needs and met my needs. And if it had been anybody else, I wouldn't have done it,
Mm,
because I took a lot of risk in that. But I knew I could trust them because they were
hmm.
honest, kind of core Minnesotan kind of people, who also I knew would run the business incredibly well, better than me, and um, brought the right experience and knowledge, and had business savvy, because one of them also has an MBA, and so
Wow.
a master's in horticulture and an MBA. And so I just knew they would be successful. So I knew that that risk wasn't as significant as it would be
Was it
with.
something like an earnout where like you had like some sellers note plus
Yeah,
like
yeah,
performance based, so that way
yeah.
like
And a
did it
lot of
make
it
it?
was in the performance side, and it made that
Was it
work for
really?
them. Yeah, a lot of that made it work for them. And I think they're incredibly happy because it did work for them, and I'm happy because it worked for me. I got my Took me longer to get my money than I would have liked, but ultimately I'm really happy with how it turned out. And so
Did that flexibility that you gave allow for the deal to be done? Because I think in the lower middle market size deals, cash flow being such a constraint becomes an issue, because like you get the SBA loans. What makes the SBA loans work is you have 10 years to spread that payment term out, but the bank's holding it for 10 years
mhm,
because it's a mainly, but then if you start trying to get, you smush that payment together, that it stuff, suffocates the cash flow. So then it becomes this really weird deal structure dynamic, which is why I find it fascinating that the level of trust that you had on them, because it's almost a necessary part of that to get the deal done.
yeah, yeah, it would not have worked with anyone else. And had I showed it to a savvy advisor, they would have said, "No, don't. This is a terrible idea. Why are you doing
Mm-hmm.
this? This is a
Mm-hmm.
successful business that makes money, and you don't need to do this." But I believed in them, And I knew that, we structured in a way that I was ultimately got what I wanted to get out of the business. It just took me a little longer to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I trusted them and knew they would do good work. And then 3 weeks after we sold, the pandemic hits.
Oh, jeez.
Oh my goodness.
What did they think? Welcome to business. I mean, like, oh my
Oh,
God.
oh
What did they
man.
call? What was that phone? Did they call you up? You call them up? What?
I think I called first. And I will tell you, I felt a weird guilt, like I didn't know this was coming. Like how
Yeah,
could I?
right.
Because I was also quite lucky. I didn't have to deal with the pandemic.
Yeah.
Exited it at a really good time, but I felt kind of guilty, like, oh my goodness, they're dying right
But
now.
that must have been emotional for them because, I mean, everything shut down and then everything went up like a freaking rocket ship for home services. So, like,
It really worked
emotional.
out to be, but you didn't know that was going to happen.
Right,
There
right.
was
That's what I'm saying.
like,
Like the emotional whiplash of over
yeah,
even like 90 days was intense.
but I tell you what, it's interesting because that if there's something I learned from all the business experiences I've had is be tenacious because things will more often work out than they don't. I mean, there are bad stories out there where it doesn't work out, but tenacious people tend to find a way to make it work. You
Mhm.
don't have to get every choice right because you have an influence on the outcome, and you have more influence on the outcome than you realize.
Mhm.
And so you don't have to get the perfect choice because that can be paralyzing. I was paralyzed for 6 years trying to make a perfect choice. I didn't make the perfect choice, but the effort I put in turned it into, in retrospect, pretty great choice. It all worked out. Everybody kind of won at the end of the day.
What, now that you're in Vistage as a facilitator
Mhm.
and chair, when you think about like the dynamics you've had of teaching versus medical versus owning a business, you thought it was going to be B2B, now it's B2C. Like, how do you think about the jigsaw of like aligning the puzzle pieces to enjoy the hell out of what you're doing every single day while making money? And like when you prioritize your week and what makes you happy, like how do you think about it?
Well, one thing I think about often is I wish I had had the opportunity or had been able to do this 20 years earlier because I love doing this. The thing I love more than anything was when I was actually teaching in the classroom. That's the job I actually enjoyed the most of anything I've ever done. But this is a very close second. And I would have gotten bored with teaching eventually. It's a little bit of a Groundhog Day thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can only teach a class differently if so many times. Whereas this is infinitely variable. I'm working with essentially 12 to 16 businesses at any given time. Each one's really unique problems. Love troubleshooting. Love working with business owners and CEOs. I just, I just, I feel in tremendous gratitude just to have an opportunity to do this. And I'm not I had a little dip, at about the 3 year mark. But I said to
Not
my
time to
wife,
pull a grenade and try to
yeah,
figure it
every
all
three
out.
years I get bored and I want to do something else. And I felt that at about the 3 year mark, but that's kind of gone away because there's nothing else better than this. Like I
That's cool.
survey for me, I survey what other things could I do, and I go, I wouldn't enjoy doing anything more than this. And at this stage of my career, it's nice to be doing something that there's not an alternative that is at all attractive, you know. Whereas before, I think earlier in my career, everything was shiny and looked like it might be fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
I thought lawn care might be shiny and fun to do. And I discovered, actually, no. not that fun to do.
I, I I do find it kind of fascinating how much you just don't enjoy lawn care. Because I actually love my lawn and I love lawn care. But I think it's just funny because I felt the same way, Bill. Like when I got into the family business and like it was copiers. I mean, like,
Yeah, I
who
remember that.
gives a living shit about copiers? Not me. And like
Yeah,
my dad, like he was like, "Oh, technology," and I'm like, "Dad, this is not technology anymore. Like, you can't convince me this is tech. Like, it's a
yeah.
freaking like we're duplicating pages. Woo!" And like, and I just like, and that's why it's really interesting, Bill. Like that distraction that I wanted was I pulled us into the IT services way faster than I should have. And it's really interesting. I look back as into my young days. I'm like, oh my God, interesting. But yeah, it's like trying to find the leadership, the business stuff inside of an operations. Like you can kind of balance the two. And like, as I going back to that mentor of yours and said, choose something that you love to do. What, or no, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't choose something I loved. It was the guy that said, was it Beck? He said, what was the guy's name about join a peer group or
Yeah,
like
Floyd
start a
Edelman.
company?
Floyd said you need to know what it's
But
like
yeah,
to be worried
okay.
about making payroll. That was literally
So,
the example he gave.
and that's what I wanted to go back to of now that you sit in front of these 12-ish business owners,
Yep.
what are the pieces of empathy or the variables that you have that you're going, oh my God, I know exactly what that's
Oh,
like.
it happens almost every day. It's, what part of it is when you're the owner or the CEO, every decision you make has kind of an upside and a downside for somebody in the organization or what have you. There's and it's not easy to decide. It's hard because you're in the center of a hub where every decision is impacting lots of different things. And you have
Mm-hmm.
people who are coming to you representing one part of that hub, and you're trying to think about the whole hub. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's hard about being in the center of the wheel is understanding that. And that's why a peer group I find to be so powerful because everybody in that room sits in that seat where they realize every decision has an upside and a downside. And I'm trying to think about it all and get to the best decision I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, when I'd been a director of clinical studies, and even when I was the president of a college, it's like it was different when I was an owner. It had a different vibe to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the the having Floyd was right. I am so much a better chair because I own my own business and I had the fears and anxieties of running my own business. Any other position I had, I could resign at any point, walk away, and be fine. You, when you own the business, you can't just walk away one day easily. It's a process. You have to go
Like
through the process.
easily.
Yeah,
Like you could, it would just blow
you
up your
could,
whole
but it would
life.
be it'd be ugly. It'd be ugly.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
and so that was there's many times when I think, oh, I've been in that situation. Now, what that owner should do isn't necessarily what I did in that situation. So I'm not always saying, hey, I was there before, but I have a better sense of the questions I should be asking
Mm-hmm.
so that they can get to the best place for them. Because really, that I was there in a similar space is helpful for me to have empathy, but it doesn't tell them where they should go.
Right, right.
They need to
What
arrive at.
what are your thoughts about because I'm thinking about like, okay, you wanted to sell after 3 years and it was 9. You had that product situation, wasn't B2C, it wasn't B2B, it was B2C. It wasn't an industry you were totally infatuated with. What are your thoughts about doing things that you don't want to do and doing them anyways?
I think that's life, isn't it? I mean, this idea that everybody's going to go out and do their quote unquote passion. you know, somebody's got to do the stuff that, I mean, what's that TV show, the Dirty Work or something like that,
Yeah, micro. Yep.
yeah. And so every business has the unpleasant parts of it. Even the ones that I had passion in, there's parts of it that you didn't like. And usually those are the ones that you're best getting done first,
Hmm.
because the stuff you don't like often is best to get off your plate early and well, when you have the energy. So,
Eat the
I think,
ugliest frog first, right?
yeah, that's right. I think you do have to eat that frog first. And so I do sometimes. The biggest thing that happens with owners is they're slow to make a decision because they're worried about getting it right. And a less than perfect decision made timely is better than a perfect decision made late.
Well said. My God, I could cheer that way all the way to the top of a mountain. I saw this other quote yesterday, Bill, that I thought was interesting. It was when you don't know what to do something because it'll give you data. And like,
Yeah,
as long as it's not something that you're risking like a 30-year bet, right? Like maybe do something that's,
yeah,
a quick data feed, but also not hugely long-term impact. But like doing something gives you feedback.
yeah. That boss I mentioned, who was one of my great bosses, Jeff Sims, he used to say, everything's a test. We're going to run this test, gather the data, make another decision based on the test.
Hmm.
Versus every decision is a thing in concrete that can never be
Right.
changed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think having done things where they weren't perfect and I didn't make exactly the right decision, what I learned from it was you can still turn it into a good thing. You can everything can be turned into an opportunity. In
Mm.
fact, you know, sometimes that's a really helpful way to find the best solution is this thing sucks. Okay, how can I turn that into an opportunity? And when you pause to work through how can this thing that sucks become an opportunity, that often is the road to solving it.
Hmm. I love it. As you look to the coming year, what's one thing that you think that people should be paying attention to and why? And then what's one thing that you think is a unique opportunity and why?
Hmm. Well, what should they be paying attention to um, is uh, not always focused on the horizon. Um, which it's good to look at the horizon and where am I headed? But there is a tremendous joy in what you're doing today to get to that horizon.
Mm,
You know, you know, being always focused on the end and not enjoying the moment is not a good path. You know, so I just think at the end of the year, it's a good time to think about how next year will I be present in the moment and think about these hard decisions I make right now. You know, uh, this is part of my journey. I'm going to enjoy that. I'm going to enjoy this moment right now. One of the things I talked to my group about is, take a sensory audit periodically. What am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I tasting? Anchor that memory, because you don't want to get to the end of your career and go, okay, I got to the end, but what happened?
yeah.
What did I
So well
enjoy
said.
along the way? Um, it's only a great career if you enjoyed the whole journey, not just getting to some horizon point. Um,
I love
the,
that. Well, just a real quick comment on the Bill. It's like I was interviewing a guy last week who's unbelievably successful. He's like, these are the good old days. At one point, we're gonna look back and it's like this whole life is a journey. It's like the whole point of a roller coaster isn't to be done with it. It's
yeah,
actually it's getting on the freaking roller coaster.
yeah. So pause, take a sensory inventory,
I like
lock
it.
that memory in. What's good about it? Learn from every day. In terms of what's an opportunity, I've seen the future many times. That's the cool thing about being in your 60s. I've seen the future many times. I
Interesting.
remember at Guidant moving from inner office mail to email. And I remember going, wow, that is so efficient. Unbelievable. This is amazing. Um, and AI is the internet all over again. And, uh, as much as we know it's going to change everything, we don't realize how it's going to change everything.
Hmm.
And I do think a lot of people are dabbling. Yeah, I think your last guest was an AI, right? I
Hmm.
need, I need to call him, by the way.
He
Um,
does a bunch of Vistage workshops. I think you'd like him.
yeah, I got to talk to him. Stop dabbling in AI. It's going to change everything. And if you're dabbling, you're you're not taking advantage of this. In the same way that we went from inner office mail, people carrying boxes of physical mail from office to office. In 5 years, we're gonna go, wow, I can't believe we used to do this way.
How are the business owners that you're exposed to? How are they approaching it mentally and like practically?
Yeah, so they're all trying to push that envelope. Um, so it's an onion that they're trying to peel a layer at a time, and that is the way it's going to work. Is a layer at a time. It's not gonna happen all in one fell swoop. It's gonna happen a piece at a time. And as long as I think for them, as long as they're taking what's the next logical step? I think of it as like, what's next door to this? Okay, go into that door. Okay, great. What's next door to that?
Hmm.
Go
Hmm.
through that door. And you got to keep marching along. I think the one piece where everybody is probably slow is I think we need to start putting more resources against it. Hiring people within your organization who are going to focus on that implementation to help get it done. Because there's
Yeah,
tremendous
isn't that
value.
why it was fascinating to have Tyler on because it's very similar to how I approach it. Just get shit done. Like go in there, take a problem, tackle it, get it done. And I- I'm seeing Bill like it's just finding people that have curiosity and aren't scared of something, just letting them like run with it. It's like I don't know. I saw this with with my generation because I grew up in this weird tweener where like as a 86 millennial, I grew up with no internet essentially. I did like I got my first like our family got a compact computer when I was late high school. We got Napster and AOL or whatever, but like 0 through 16, like there was no cell phone. You know what I mean? So it was like effectively the same growing up,
Right.
more so to you guys than even my younger brother. And like,
Yeah.
but I'm only bringing this up because a lot of people in my generation, like you can't break the internet and most of this stuff versus like, I think some people think that you're going to like you realize that it's different every single day. So you're just
Right.
always expecting it to change versus I think I've seen a lot of people, they go and try it and like, oh, that didn't get me what I want. And then they like write it off. And it's like kind of just constantly having that beat your head against the wall and just default to trying it out because all of a sudden it starts blowing your mind that it changes and you just start getting that addicted feedback loop of just getting the little stuff done then the bigger stuff back to your onion point.
Yeah. Yeah. You do have to keep at it because um, it, we've all experienced AI does stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
And I've
Make shit up.
seen people, right. I've seen people write it off. Well, this isn't going to work. Well, I remember the first time I saw somebody with a cell phone. It was a brick
Yeah.
at the University of Minnesota. I'm a veterinary student at that point. He's calling his construction crew on this brick. You know, 5 years later, just like flip phones. I mean, just how quickly it went
Yeah.
from a brick
Yeah.
to, and it just, as we all know where it went. And we're in the brick stage of AI.
Mm-hmm.
It's clunky but it's going to happen in a big way. And the more you engage with it, like you said, the more get, um, you're going to get into that flow and it's going to become a natural extension of things you do.
It's awesome. Bill, so fun getting to hear the full story. Any last thoughts? Or like, I mean, if for the listeners, you don't have to come up with anything
Well,
specific, but
I'll say that, the reason you and I are talking is I first saw you present the work you do and why it's important at a Vistage meeting 4 years ago when I was a member, and I thought it was very impactful. I still think about some of the things I learned in that session. So I
it's awesome.
appreciate the work that you do with owners, and I think it's incredibly valuable to ultimately treat your business like an asset and be more rewarded by being part of it. And then when the time comes to exit, be glad you exited, not regret it.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Bill. I can put your LinkedIn if you want to. What's the
Sure.
best way for
Yeah,
people to get
LinkedIn
in touch
is
with
the
you?
best. My LinkedIn is the best way to probably reach out to
Yeah,
me. The beautiful thing that with my group is, we have a lot of, people join a group and stay for a long time. So probably looking for one additional member right now. And what's cool about one additional member for me is they every new member brings this new dynamic to the room
mm-hmm.
that is so much. It's like so exciting when a new member comes into the group because there's this whole new
The whole
dynamic.
thing orients differently.
Totally gets change. The whole culture of the room changes by that one new member every time it
Yeah,
happens. And so I'm always excited by as a new member enters the room because of the shift that happens in the room
yeah.
because they bring some special sauce that just helps remake things yet again. So
Well, thanks so much for coming on. This has been a blast.
yeah, it's been a blast as well. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.